Good afternoon, Chamber members.
And you know it's a good sign when you see the Carlson Center parking lot cleared out. That's got to be indicating something, right? Well, right now it looks like it's going to be great all the way through the weekend. Temperatures right up around 30, 32 degrees, lots of sunshine, no more snow in the forecast.
Yay.
I have no place to put it. That's good reason. I'd like to welcome board new member, Cardinal Point Strategic Resources. Anybody here representing those folks? All right, and how about 24/7 Alaska Towing? Well, we'd like to thank them for coming on board, that's for sure. And also thank you to the following renewing members: Fulford Electric, HDR Alaska Incorporated, and Corvius Air Force Living, LLC. Hope I'm saying it right. Anyway, thanks to all those folks for showing their confidence in the Chamber, and please show them your appreciation also. Any special introductions? Please raise your hand. There you go.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Charlie Leonelli with Mac Federal Credit Union, and it's my privilege to introduce to you visiting guest today, Bonnie Nelson. Bonnie is with PMD Marketing Group, and if you have a moment after the meeting and you'd like to find out about the amazing things that she's capable of doing and her very significant pocket of people, please stay after and chat with her.
Oh, very nice.
Anybody else? Up.
Hi, I'm Teresa Chipote-Usabelli. I work for Catholic Bishop Northern Alaska, and I was, a long time ago, past president of the Chamber in Denali Borough. And today I want to introduce to you the new secretary for the Denali Borough Chamber and the board representative for the state chamber. This is Jordan Heckley.
Hi. Oh, there we go. Hi, thanks everybody. And then Vanessa, our executive director, is here as well. So Denali's represented, but we're happy to be here. Thanks.
All right, anybody else? Okay, we got a full agenda today, so we'll let it get back to you, and I'll have the microphone later on for questions if you have any. Somebody else might forget him? Yes. Can't forget you. You just got to raise your hand higher for me.
Just a short notice, the plain white wrapper on your table, the Tanana Valley Fair Association is now accepting nominations for the board, and if you're interested in being on the fair board, please take a look at this. It tells you all the pertinent dates and what is required. Over the water.
Thank you. Oh, we're not going to have any questions. All right.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Joining me and Marissa at the head table today, from your right to left, we have Kara Moriarty, Alaska Oil and Gas Association, Aaron Schutt, Doyon Limited, Chris Kennedy, Sumitomo Metal Mining Pogo. That's long. Welcome. Audra, Brase, Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Ken Hall, Linden Transport, and Katie Capozzi. Welcome. And we have Derek Dickinson with us today. He's going to lead us in the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for this time together. We're grateful for the relationships in this room and in this community. We thank you for the great work of the Chamber and all they do, the volunteers and staff for this community. Lord, we do ask that you open our ears to what the speakers have to share with us today. And we do ask for special protection for those who serve our community in dangerous professions, such as firefighters and the military and the police. I ask all these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. Join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Derek. We had a board meeting yesterday. The board heard a presentation and had a discussion with Kara Moriarty on her industry's perspective and concerns related to the proposed ballot initiative to change the fish habitat permitting process. The board also updated our current position of supporting a fiscal plan for the state of Alaska by adding language that supports how to use the permanent dividend fund earnings reserve as part of the fiscal plan. The Government Relations Committee is finalizing that work, and an update will be made available when complete. I'd like to invite Marissa up to give her President CEO report.
Thank you, Tiffany. I have a handful of announcements for everyone today. First, I just wanted to, on a lighter note, I wanted to let everyone know that we are looking for input for our 2018 Golden Days theme. So if you've got any good ideas for us, you can email it to us, you can give us a call, you can put it on our Facebook page, send a pigeon, whatever. We're interested in your ideas so that we can have that theme established by the end of next week. The March edition of Power Hour is coming up on March 28th. There's information in the tri-stand at the center of your table. That session will be led by Greg Martin from Greg Martin Photography, and you will get some tips and tricks to improve your photography to include helping your composition, how to shoot better portraits, landscapes, and even wildlife shots. You can bring your own lunch, or you can register ahead of time and include that you would like for us to provide your lunch for you for just a $15 fee. We're happy to do that. Space is limited to 20, so if you want to get signed up for that, please do so before it fills up. And then also we've got tickets available for the Military Appreciation Banquet. That banquet will be held on Friday, May 4th, right here at the Carlson Center. Tickets are available online, and this is our 50th anniversary, so this is going to be a very special event. We've got some special things in store for you. You can see information on your tables or check us out at fairbankschamber.org. And real quickly, because there's a number of you here in the room today, and I want you to know how much we appreciate it, I wanted to thank our sponsors, which include Boeing, Mac Federal Credit Union, Doyon Utilities, Alaska Pipeline Service Company, ConocoPhillips, Lockheed Martin, Summers & Associates Realtors, North Haven Communities, Sourdough Fuel, Usabelli Coal Mine, Birchwood Homes, the Borough, and Armed Services YMCA of Alaska. So thank you so much for their tremendous support of this very special event that lifts and supports our military. Also, put this on your calendar. Go ahead and take your phone out right now and put it on there. The next 2 weeks, our chamber luncheons are going to be at Raven Landing, not here at the Carlson. So if you come here, I don't know what you'll be participating in, but it will not be the chamber luncheons, which include an LRDR update on the 27th, and then on April 3rd, we've got a DOT update. So those will be good ones to join us at the Raven Landing Center for. And then finally, today we've got APU here in the back. He is recording, and this presentation will be available live on YouTube. The link is on our Facebook page. We'll email that out later, and then it will also be available on demand later. So if during this presentation you hear some information, you're like, man, I wish so-and-so was here so that they could hear this, don't fret. You can go ahead and send that link on to others following the luncheon today, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Marissa. I'm glad you mentioned that we're all being filmed, so everyone is aware of that. Especially Bart. One of the Fairbanks Chamber's advocacy priorities for 2018 is to support the Stand for Alaska Coalition by educating our members on the real dangers of the potential ballot initiative called Stand for Salmon, as well as on the current robust permitting process our state already has in place. Today we're hosting a panel discussion with representatives across several sectors. Our panelists include Kara Moriarty, the President and CEO of the Alaska Oil and Gas Association, Aaron Schutt, the President and CEO of Doyon Limited, Chris Kennedy, General Manager of Sumitomo Metal Mining Pogo, Audra, Brase, the Regional Supervisor of the Division of Habitat for the State Department of Fish and Game here in Fairbanks. Welcome. A couple things. I'll be moderating the conversation today, and before we begin, I'd like to do two things. Thanking the panelists for coming and talking to the Fairbanks membership today. Thanks again. Second, I want it to be clear that Audra is representing a state agency and has a wealth of information and experience with the current permitting process. She's not here to choose a side on the initiative, but she can speak to their process and how the Department of Fish and Game are currently protecting Alaska's fish habitat in the permitting process. All right. The first question is going to be asked of all the panelists. I'd like to begin the discussion by giving each panelist up to 2 minutes to introduce themselves and, if applicable, how you're affiliated with Stand for Alaska. And Kara, I'd like you to go first.
Well, first of all, thank you to the Chamber for the invitation to have this panel conversation. I think it's, we have found with this issue, there's a lot of unknowns yet and there's not a very high level of awareness yet about this issue. So this gives us an opportunity to talk about that. A little bit about me. I have been with the Alaska Oil and Gas Association for almost 13 years. And as some of you know, previous to that, I was Marissa. I ran the chamber and was a very proud Fairbanks resident for 7 years. So for me, my role in the Stand for Alaska campaign is I serve on the steering committee, and the Alaska Oil and Gas Association was one of the first funders to come in the door to put the coalition together. And so we're very involved, as it will have a huge impact on our industry, and I'll talk about that later. But thanks again for the invitation, and it's good to be back.
Aaron.
Tiffany. There we go. Thanks. It's great to be here. I want to recognize we have our board chair and our vice chair, Wally Carlo and PJ Simon from Doyon Limited here. I'm the president of Doyon. I've been at Doyon for 12 years now. Doyon has taken official position on the Stand for Alaska. We are a supporter of Stand for Alaska officially. I got involved, I'm a co-chair of Stand for Alaska, in large part because I see the two risks to Alaska from the initiative. One is the one that everybody thinks about, which is industry and development. But the other is more personal to me, is community development. And the initiative itself doesn't really distinguish on small projects versus large. And having worked on early in my career many rural projects as an attorney trying to help get those things over the line, I know how hard it is to find the funding, get the permits, get it all done in a short period of time. And to see those things threatened on the go forward if the initiative passes, I think would be very detrimental to our rural communities. And I like to emphasize that when I talk about this initiative in public. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris.
Thanks for having me here. As you can tell by my title, General Manager at Pogo Mine, you can understand where I stand on this as far as being in the mining industry goes. Myself, 42 years in the mining industry. 23 years of that have been here in Alaska, working at the three of our major mines here in Alaska, Fort Knox, Greens Creek, and Pogo. So for me, it's important that we make sure we understand what is in this initiative. Because what's in this initiative, in my view, when you take a look at what we do in the mining industry, has a huge impact. And not only for the mining industry, but for all other industries as well. So, thanks for having me here.
Audra.
Hi, thanks for having me. Oops. Thanks for having me. My name's Audra Brase. I'm with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. I've worked for the department for over 20 years. I've worked for both the divisions of sport fish, commercial fisheries, and now most recently for the Division of Habitat. I'm out here at the Fairbanks office. We are Region 3, which stretches from the Mat-Su Valley all the way up to the North Slope oil fields. So we're covering the largest portion of the state, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of fish-bearing water bodies there that we're responsible for. So I'm here to kind of tell you guys a little bit about how our permitting process works. I am not affiliated with Stand for Alaska, but I'm happy to answer questions and hopefully educate you guys today. Thanks.
Thank you. This question is for all panelists. Can you describe in about 3 minutes, with the relation to your industry, agency, or the people you represent, how the so-called Salmon Habitat Initiative will impact you? And we'll start with Aaron.
Thanks. I think I answered part of it in my opening comments. I'll focus on Doyon Limited, I guess, in our activities. As you all know, most of our commercial activity in the state is in the oil field. And just to highlight where, if this initiative passed, some of the things that would be major challenges for us as contractors, and then on our own accord as we explore for oil and gas in the Yanamento Basin. Just think about an ice road permit, which people don't normally associate with fish, but you have to get your water from somewhere. And if the initiative passed, you'd have to prove every body of water that you're drawing from to build your ice road is not anadromous before you could get that permit, because under the initiative, you wouldn't know which permit, minor or major, until you made that determination. Those studies are not going to occur in one season, so you'd have to plan multiple years in advance to even know which permit you were applying for. And if they were anadromous fish-bearing streams or otherwise, you're probably in the major permit category. That's undefined in the initiative. And it just greatly complicates the efforts to continue oil and gas exploration. I was just showing Kara, for example, 2 pictures of our rigs that are out on exploration for ConocoPhillips right now. The ice roads they built for both of those Conoco projects are about 50 miles long. So I'm guessing that there were more than one body of water that they had to draw from to get those ice roads built. And those are the kinds of things that are obviously so important to our industry, but also the state in terms of revenue that we derive, as we know, from the oil and gas industry, both production and production taxes and royalties and all those things. Those would drive our economy, and those are the things that make understanding how important this initiative could affect all of us in the state, and that's why Doyon has taken a strong position on this initiative.
Thank you. Chris, you're next.
Excuse me. Well, for me, when you take a look at the initiative and you take a look at some of the information in the initiative, it has, as far as the mining industry goes, it has some what I call mining killers, if you will. It has potential to stop mining in the state. When you take a look at some of the wording that's in the initiative, specifically the automatic denial of a permit, when it talks about, example, dry stack, our dry stack tailings for Pogo, we would not get a permit because of that, because of the disturbance, if it caused substantial impact. Substantial impact that can't be repaired. Everything under that ground, under that dry stack, cannot be repaired. So we wouldn't get a permit. And that's just one example. Some of the words in there and some of the terms are broad reaching. You know, what is substantial impact? That leaves it wide open. There is no really good definition as to what that is. So for when you take a look at my experience and in the mining industry, huge impact. It has the effect that it brings all waters in Alaska into one area. So if you have a dry stream even, and it's impacted during a rainstorm, and it has water in it, it comes down, it goes into another stream. That stream goes into the river. That river goes into an anadromous stream or river. You can't get a permit. You have to like you said, do years and years of research to get that permit to decide, is this going to impact? So again, there's so many things in that it's hard to describe just one or two, because it's just large, everything in there. And in my opinion, I think it's directly, it's a direct impact to mining, because I think that's the way it's geared towards. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. Audra?
So as for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, we don't have an official position on this at this time. What we can say is that, from what we interpret through the initiative right now, so there would be a public process associated with it. Currently, our fish habitat permits have no public process. And then also some of the permits we would not be allowed to issue them. It just cuts us off right there. So that's about all I can say about that at this point, but I'll be able to talk about other things more.
Okay, thank you. Kara?
Well, I think Aaron gave a great description of an oil and gas example specific to ice roads. But what I would say even more broadly, the impact the initiative has is it just creates another level of uncertainty of how to do business in Alaska, whether it's the oil and gas industry or not. There's, because the initiative is written very broadly, and in our argument, it's written very poorly. It's a very poorly crafted. Our environmental counsel has looked at it just from a very lawyerly perspective. And just the construct of the initiative, it's very confusing, very convoluted. So it creates a lot of uncertainty about which projects need a minor permit, which ones needs a major permit. Creates a lot of uncertainty around litigation and timing. And in the oil and gas industry, one of the things that we have been able to rely on is the very strong state permitting system that we have had in place. And even though the current fish habitat permit doesn't have a public process, and that law may not have changed since statehood, there are 18 other state and federal regulations and laws that we have to comply with for a typical project, that a lot of those permits have a very public process. And so there is a perception out there that somehow our permitting system is broken. And we would argue, we've been using that as the argument of why we should finally be able to open up ANWR, is that the state of Alaska has one of the strongest permitting systems in the nation. And of course we want to do it right. And of course we want to be environmentally friendly, because we're Alaskans and we want to protect where we live more than anybody else. So I think from a broader perspective, it's creating this level of uncertainty and perception that we don't have a strong permitting system, which I think is just very damaging for the potential for business development in our industry.
Thank you, Kara. Our next question is for Audra. Can you describe the Department of Fish and Game's current permitting policies as it relates to the initiative and how you currently protect fish habitat and make permitting decisions for development? Long question.
I know, and they told me I had 2 minutes to answer this. I was like, really? I have like a 40-minute presentation on this. So to make it really short and sweet, I guess, the current laws, it's said a lot that, our laws haven't been updated in a long time. Well, that's the truth. However, we have the advantages of that is we have a lot of flexibility in our current permitting laws for the state of Alaska and the fish habitat permits. So when somebody comes in and they want to, do some sort of project, whether it's they want to install a culvert, they want to do placer mining, they want to, improve a runway, if they're doing something that's going to be impacting a fish-bearing water body, they have to get a permit from us. So first thing is we talk about the project. What are they going to do? Where are they going to do it? Are there fish in that water body? If there are, what kind of fish are they? And what's going on with them? Is this rearing habitat? Is this spawning habitat? Is this just a passage for fish? When we talk about individual fish permits, they truly are individual because every system we look at has got unique aspects to it. We're looking at, we can't have a cookie cutter approach. We're not a one size fits all permit. We don't just rubber stamp things when it comes through. So we have a huge state. My region itself is huge. Aspects of things that happen here in Fairbanks are totally different than things that happen on the North Slope. So that's all the things we have to consider when we're looking at an individual permit. So once we figure out what's going on with the fish in that system, and maybe we don't know if there's fish in that system, so then we have to go out and we do some on-the-grounds trapping. We put out fish, we do these fish trap things, we catch them in, or we do electroshocking. We assess all that sort of stuff. We have a staff of professional biologists who this is what they do for a living. We care about fish. That's why we're in the careers that we are. So once we find out if there's fish there, and then we work with the applicants to make sure we're not going to be impacting the system or there'll be minimal impacts. Our permits have stipulations on them occasionally where we have a work window. Let's say it's salmon habitat. So we don't want you working when the salmon are moving through there because you may be impacting them. So we'll put a work window. You're going to work early in the spring or you're going to work late in the fall when there's low waters. We may put stipulations on for, we talked about water withdrawals for ice roads. We have screening stipulations on the North Slope. You can't draw down too much water underneath the ice to make sure the fish are still can survive. And these are things that we just do here in the interior. Down in Southeast, they have totally different considerations because, as you can imagine, they don't have as much ice, of course, as we do. Down in the Matsu Valley, they have different considerations as well. So that's the advantage of our current permitting laws, is that we have that flexibility. We're not a black and white kind of agency, I guess. It's gray issues. So we're not cookie cutter, and that's a really, really short. I'd like to go into more detail, but I know I don't have the time for it. So,
Thank you. Our next question is for Aaron. Many of your shareholders and other Alaska Natives throughout the state have had restrictions placed on their subsistence allowances in the last several years. In your view, do you think this ballot measure would restore healthy salmon runs in the areas of the state that we have experienced declines?
Thanks. I think that's a great question. I don't think that our shareholders and Alaska Natives that have had subsistence fishing restrictions are believing that passing the initiative is going to restore the runs on its own. There's a pretty well-known cause and effect relationship between commercial fishing and bycatch and those sorts of issues in Chinook salmon. There's also the great unknown of what's happening in the oceans that affects the returns. Obviously, Fish and Game has predictions every year in all the river systems, and they're usually wrong, which we can't blame them. It's a very complex system, right? Sometimes we know it's going to be a good run, but sometimes we get surprised. And that's all the things out in the ocean that we just don't know. So I think Alaska Natives are very aware of that. Now, there is a strong set of beliefs out there that salmon is important enough that people are going to vote for this initiative because of the issue of affecting salmon. And there's one thing I wanted to share that in our rural communities, and this is my belief, I suppose, or observation, in our rural communities, there are many that have a very weak cash economy, and subsistence hunting and fishing is still prime there. The only way to make a living for your family or feed your family is through subsistence. In those communities, there sometimes is not an appreciation for what industry does or the rest of the state for that community. In fact, there's sometimes a rally around your own community and a resistance to the broader state that I see. And in that sense, if it's more strongly protect fish or whatever else happens, you're going to vote to more strongly protect fish. It would be the same for any other species that those communities rely on. So I see that out there, and it's our job to help people understand how this initiative actually impacts those communities. Some of the things I talked about, when you don't think about a road project or an airport improvement project until you try to get a permit to bail gravel out of a river and you can't get it, and that money might pass you by in the state system, and maybe you need that airport a lot, or maybe you need that road to a new landfill. I've worked on those types of projects, as I said in the past. And those are the types of community impacts I just don't think people are tying to this. Rather, it's that gut instinct. We rely on salmon, therefore we have to support this. And it's hard to tell people, read this legalese, figure out how it's going to impact you, and then make a decision and vote. That's a hard thing to ask people to do. So we need to do a good job of helping people explain. We're not anti-fish. I'm not anti-fish. I'm known to go out and catch a few fish myself, and I think everybody else in this room wants to support healthy and sustainable fisheries in this state. The question is, can we live with the permitting system we have? Maybe we should make it a little better in some areas, but should this initiative pass is a different question than all those questions. And that's where we've come to the conclusion at Doyon that we have to oppose the initiative. That doesn't mean we oppose other aspects of possible permitting reform or other things. but we have to protect our ability to make a living and do community development and have industry in the state to support all of our shareholders and their jobs and our communities.
Thank you, Aaron. We have a 3-part question for Chris. Can you quickly touch on how long the permitting process took from beginning to end for a project like Pogo? Describe what kind of ongoing monitoring takes place to keep those permits. And lastly, tell us how often you have to reapply for your permits. And I can repeat the questions as needed.
And you might have to.
All right.
How long it takes us, I'll start from the back end, how long it takes us to keep our permits, or how long, what's our length of time. We have to reapply and renew our permits every 5 years. That being said, every 3 years, it takes almost 2 years to get ready to reapply for those permits. We have 57 permits at Pogo. 25% of those are fish habitat permits. We have to have a fish habitat permit for the road, every bridge that's on that road, every culvert that's on that road, everything that we do out there that may impact the fish habitat. We have to have a permit, and we go through a lot of work to make that happen. So every 5 years is when we renew, but we do start probably every 3 years to get that renewal done. The first question was...
Can you tell us how long the permitting process took from beginning to end for a project like Pogo?
I was looking back in some history for us, and it was fairly close to 7 to 8 years it took us to get permitted, which is relatively a short time when you take a look at all the other mines throughout the industry. It was done fairly quickly when you take a look and you compare to other industries. But I have to commend Carl and his group back then for making that happen. He did a lot of work, and they put a lot of effort into it in the beginning of Pogo. And the second question?
Describe what kind of ongoing monitoring takes place to keep your permits, your 57 permits.
57 permits, ongoing monitoring. Well, monitoring falls under the APDES permit and the DNR permits that we have. Water sampling, weekly water sampling that we do, and we send out to a third party. It's not to our lab on site. We have to send it out to a third party, which is down in the lower 48s. We have to do fish tissue sampling, quite honestly, out in the Good Pasture River and in association with Fish and Game to make sure that we aren't impacting any of the fish, not only just salmon, grayling, everything else that's in that river we take into consideration, and we test those on a yearly basis. We do salmon count. I don't know that is quite in one of the permits, but we voluntarily do salmon counts. We've done salmon counts since 2006, and there has been virtually no impact. The average salmon to run up there, up the Good Pasture River, is just a little over 2,000 a year. And there's a window that we do salmon counts in, and so that's the amount or amount of time that they have that they count those that average. Some years it's been higher, some years it's been lower. I think the maximum was around 4,000 that came up there during that 10-day, I think it's a 10-day period that they count. Other years the number was less, but that was because of rain events, and when the rain events come through, flooding happens and you can't count fish in muddy water. The other one we have to take care of and watch that we do any projects that we do out there, there's a bird nesting time period for us that we can't impact any ground because of bird nesting. So we've got to make sure that we comply with that as well. So the primary one is water sampling for us. Everything we do out there, we want to make sure that we take care of that river. That river is number one for us at the bottom of that canyon. It's number one for us to take care of, everything we do. And so other things that we have to do, we do air monitoring, air sampling, so we can monitor that with all of the induction furnaces that we have. They have to comply and pass. And those are the primary ones that we have to do out there. But it is a lot of work, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Okay, thank you. I have one follow-up question. Is a project like Pogo or any large currently operating mine exempt from the new regulations proposed in the ballot measure?
No. If you take a look at what's in the initiative, it says that current mines are exempt, but if you read a little bit farther in there, it says until your permit is up for renewal. Once your permit is up for renewal, you have to comply with what the initiative is going to bring into us. And quite honestly, like I said before, we wouldn't get a permit. We would not get a permit. And that would impact not only the employees that we have to let go, but it impact the community as well. I was checking out just some numbers on our local major vendors here in Fairbanks, and we spend $36 million just with those a year with those vendors. And so we would end up not putting that money into the community. They would end up probably laying people off in their industry. So again, it would be a huge impact to the community, and not to mention the donations and the support that we give to the community. So it would be a very, very large impact.
Thank you. And Kara, what about your industry? Are current operating projects exempt? And another part is, can you describe how this could impact taps or a future gas line?
So just like Chris mentioned, there is a belief going around that says existing projects like taps or any of the existing oil fields are exempt or grandfathered. You'll hear if they're grandfathered. And that is not accurate. As Chris said, if you read through the petition, they are exempt until project renewal or permit renewal. And so, for example, Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, I've talked to Admiral Barrett about this. They currently have, unlike their 56 permits at Pogo, they have hundreds of permits up and down the 800-mile pipeline, almost 650 actually. And so all of those would be, I think I'm back, there you go. All of those permits would now fall under this new program, which he has said they have not figured out how they could get some of these permits to move and keep Alyeska viable. The AK LNG project, Alaska LNG project is the same thing, basically the same route. They have estimated it would be 600 to 700 permits, and the president of AGDC has said that it would be virtually impossible to permit the project as proposed under this initiative. So again, it just goes back to that level of uncertainty and how you would move forward with both whether they're existing projects like TAPS or future projects, and they don't have to be big ones either. We've even had some folks within Prudhoe talk about getting a culvert. I think you mentioned culverts, Audra, and it would cost more to prove that. Because it's not just existing waterways, it's potential waterways as well. So think of a culvert, and sometimes your culvert in your backyard or in your recreational property out in the middle of nowhere in interior Alaska, it only has water flowing through that maybe 2 weeks out of the year. Well, if it's a potential waterway, it would be on you to prove that there are no anadromous fish. It's not just salmon. I mean, that's the other misnomer. It's any anadromous species, which I think, Audra, is over 20-some fish species, that this would, you would have to prove do not exist in a temporary waterway. So the person from Prudhoe said it would cost more to prove that you don't have anadromous fish in those culverts in Prudhoe, so it costs more to prove that and to permit than to replace the culvert itself.
Thank you. Our next question is for Aaron, Kara, and Chris, and we are looking for about a 1-minute response. You've discussed how the ballot measure will impact your industries or region, but can each of you give an example of how it would impact our way of life in Fairbanks? And Aaron, I'd like you to go first.
Sure. I think any major highway project that you're thinking about, you can go to the DOT's DIP list and assume that it's going to be much harder, slower, and expensive to permit each of those projects. and some of those are safety related, and you can think of any highway across the state that many of them need safety upgrades or simple culvert or bridge replacement projects. They're all going to be much more difficult, much more expensive in a time where we probably don't need extra expenses on state projects.
Thank you. Chris?
You know, I think I mentioned quite a few that would impact us locally, but, and I agree with Aaron statewide. You know, you take a look at upgrading your roads statewide. Any culvert, any bridge repair, you'd have to go through that work to make it happen, so it impact us in that area. Here, again, locally for Pogo, if you will, 320 employees, we would have to take a look at, laying off. That's a huge impact for them as well. You talk about the ripple effect. And again, I mentioned the economy that we put into the local Fairbanks area as well, and then also to the state and colleges. And so again, that impact alone is fairly huge. And when you take in Fort Knox and what they do, and you take in Greens Creek and all of the other mines in the state, how it would impact the state in itself, let alone the reduction in taxes, for the mining. So again, it would be a fairly large impact for us statewide and for the local community.
Thank you. Kara?
Well, I think, just thinking about, being a former Fairbanksan and the Fairbanks way of life, you're one of the most independent, minded citizens in Alaska. You like to have your personal freedoms, whether it's going snow machining at Summit or going to Nancy Lake or hunting out in rural Alaska in the interior. It's not just culverts and waterways, it's any disturbance of habitat or riparian areas, which means the area that, and I think Chris mentioned it, if you cause any type of disturbance. And so there's a lot of questions about ATV travel activities, especially I'm thinking about when I used to work for Gary, there was a big, huge issue about hunting access for moose hunting, and the ATVs were not going to be allowed in a certain area for a different reason. But that was a huge concern because that was a very important aspect to a Fairbanks way of life, is being able to be out for 2 weeks in the middle of September to do that type of activity. So I think, again, are you going to, if you have a cabin on a lake that's going to be fish bearing and you want to put in a permanent dock, are you going to roll the dice and pay the extra cost to prove that you're not disturbing anadromous fish habitat, or are you just going to risk it? And not that Fairbanksans would ever do that, but are you going to risk it and build the dock anyway? Because this initiative says that not only is that a civil penalty, it's a criminal charge. So now all of a sudden, are you willing to commit a crime? And will the state of Alaska prosecute those levels of crime? Because it makes any violation not just a civil penalty, it's a criminal activity. So that's another piece of this puzzle, if you will, that I think needs to be highlighted, and I think there could be tremendous impact both from your economic potential as well as just your recreational and social activities.
Thank you. Our final question is for Audra. Supporters of the ballot measure say Alaskans' law guiding development in fish habitat is 60 years old, that they are inadequate rules to protect the habitat. In the history of the current law, are there examples when the regulations have not adequately protected the habitat during development of a project?
So over the many years that we've had our permitting in place, we've issued thousands of permits across the entire state. And there are very, very few projects where we can say there have been problems. When we have run into problems, it's more likely when somebody has gone out and done a project without consulting with us, without getting a permit. So putting in something that's unpermitted, a culvert or a bridge. And then we find out about it, and then we have to start going down the path of enforcement. We prefer not to prosecute prosecute things through enforcement. We prefer to have the problem fixed, because getting just money is not going to, improve the fish habitat. If we can fix that culvert or fix that bridge, that's what's going to really help out the habitat. So what we prefer to look at is we have, we've really worked with our applicants to make sure that the projects are done right. So we keep that quality fish habitat. We ensure fish passage. The salmon can get up to the areas to spawn. The juveniles can get back downriver when they need to go out to the ocean. Those sort of things. And you're absolutely right. This is not just about salmon. This is about, it's all fish, but there's a ton of anadromous species in Alaska. For those of you who aren't, fish habitat biologists, a lamprey is considered an anadromous fish. Some whitefish are anadromous fish. You have cutthroat trout down in southeast. Some of those are anadromous. You have rainbows. So all those fish are anadromous. So we're not just talking about salmon streams, which you might say, oh, in the interior we don't have many salmon streams. Well, we actually do have quite a few. You might, if you're not aware that the Chena and the Salcha are major salmon runs to the Yukon drainage, very important ones. So we've had a lot of successes with our current permitting laws. When we go out there and we got, miners who are working on a stream and they need to dewater part of it, they need to build a new diversion. So we work with them to develop a diversion that's mimicking the stream. So it's going to have some bends in it. We're going to have rocks. We're going to have, we call it bioengineering, when you put willows in the bank and it regrows. And then when we go out there and we sample that area with the miner and we can find fish there, they are so excited. That's one of the really neat things about what we do, is to show these guys that, hey, what you're doing is having an impact. The fish are still there. They might not be in the original reach, but they're in this new reach and they're taking advantage of it. That's a good thing. With the Fort Knox mine here in Fairbanks, they rehabilitated a bunch of old settling ponds. There were no fish in there. It was really, murky water. You're like, oh my gosh, nothing would ever live in there. But they rehabbed it, and we have a viable grayling population up there now, and there's burbot as well. So we go up there and we do annual monitoring up there, and we show them the fish are there, and they're super excited about that. They're really proud of that, and they should be. They did really great work, and this is all under our fish permitting laws. We work with DOT. We've developed a memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement to when they put in culverts for what fish-friendly culverts are. Because you can have a culvert that's just pushing water really fast and no fish can get up there, not the juveniles. So we've got design standards across the whole state with DOT. So that's how Fish and Game is working with other agencies. We're not just working in a bubble. We work with the federal agencies as well. We talked about Pogo and how many years it took for them to get their project permitted. That's not just fish habitat permits that are going through. You've got the whole federal NEPA process that you have to go through, the EISs and the EAs, and those have an immense amount of public participation in them, and those take years to get permitted. So it's not just a quick and easy fish habitat permit that allows a mine to happen. It's a lot of groups working in conjunction. You've got the Army Corps, you've got the Fish and Wildlife Service, you have state agencies, DNR, DEC, Fish and Game. So there's, when you're talking about all the permits you need, there's a lot, and there's a lot of things maybe people point to that, well, where are the problems? And we haven't seen very many problems, but we have seen a lot of successes, and I think that's maybe where you might want to think about it.
Okay, thank you. We have a few extra moments, and I'd just like to ask you one more question. So I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. Can you walk us through the basics of a permitting process?
So someone comes in, they have a project that they want to do. Like I said earlier, we find out if there's fish there or not. We look at a lot of maps. We have this thing called the Anadromous Waters Catalog, and that's got all the waters that we know of in the state where there are anadromous fish already. It depends on what. I won't go into a lot of the details because I don't think you guys really want to hear that. But so once we figure out where the fish are and what their project is, then we draw up the permit. Like I said, they're all individually written. It's not just stamp it here and throw you out the door. We put what the stipulations are on that permit. They go out and they do the project. The permit is usually for a certain amount of time. Sometimes it's a 5-year permit. Sometimes it's a 6-month permit. Sometimes it's for the lifetime of the structures. For example, culverts. We want to make sure that culvert is maintaining fish passage for its entire life. So we don't just walk away from it, and the person who's putting in the culvert, they're not allowed to just walk away from it either. So that includes DOT. So when DOT has got, the culverts that have become blocked over the years, we work with them to try and maintain some passage. And sometimes the culvert was installed incorrectly, so it becomes perched. And so then we identify that. This is a problem culvert. We'd like to see this replaced. However, you can't just rip up a stretch of road to replace a culvert, any old time you want. But, when they're going to be doing maintenance in a certain stretch, they'll be like, okay, now we know this culvert is bad. We're going to replace it at this point and get that fish passage back. So that's what we're doing, is once we get that permit out there and the person does the work, we go follow up with them, make sure it was done correctly. We don't do any really kind of sign off on it, but if there was a problem with it and we're like, hey, you didn't follow what we had said in this permit, we make sure that it gets completed and fixed up before it's totally done. An example might be down at Rika's. They did a big bank stabilization project here, I can't remember if it was last spring or the spring before, and we were on grounds there every couple weeks, just checking to make sure, because it's a really important area. I mean, we're trying to protect the bank there, because the historic resource was going to fall in the river, and right outside of there's salmon spawning habitat. So we're trying to balance what's going on in the land and what's going on in the water, and we were able to do that. But to do that, we had to really be on the grounds and seeing what these guys, the contractors, were doing. And they were a little confused about what the plans were, but we all came to an understanding, and that's the advantage of our project, our process.
Thank
Does
you.
that help you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was our last question. I just wanted to thank Kara and Aaron and Chris and Audra for sharing your knowledge and experience with the Fairbanks Chamber today. The Fairbanks Chamber has joined the Coalition for Stand for Alaska, and we hope your company will do the same. I'd like to invite Ken Hall up from Linden Transport to do a business spotlight. At first, though, as Ken makes his way up here, I'd like to give our panelists a round of applause.
Well, someplace there's supposed to be a clicker here because we do have a program. Okay, which one? That one there? Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for the Chamber for bringing these important issues to Fairbanks. We're very fortunate in Fairbanks. My name is Ken Hall. I work for Linden Transport. I'll kind of start off with a disclaimer. This originally was set up with Janine St. John to come on up here and do it. She has more of the 30,000-foot view of the Linden organizations, but Alaska Airlines canceled the flight. And I'm going to check with our operations people when I get back to find out when was the last time we canceled a truck between Anchorage and Fairbanks. But to start off with that, well, and I didn't introduce them when the introductions were taking place, but I'd like to thank some of our operations people for coming today. Their day typically changes with the first text, email, phone call of the day. So if I can just kind of rattle them through, they can just kind of raise their hands and say hi. Gage Schutt on over there, he's with Alaska West Service Center Manager. Rochelle over there, she's with Alaska West Administration. We've got Renee, she's with Alaska West Human Resources. Danny Hart, he's with Operations. Aaron File with Linden Transport, Service Center Manager. And then we have Tim on over there, who's also with Alaska West Operations. Their days are chaotic and wild, and appreciate them taking the time, and would appreciate it if they don't critique me when we get back to the office. So I'm with Linden Transport. I've been with Linden Transport for about 17 years. We're an LTL truckload carrier. You see us running around town, you'll often think that maybe Fred Meyer is a substation of Linden Transport, when in fact they're just one of our customers here in Fairbanks. We service primarily the rail belt area. However, we dispatch to Prudhoe Bay nightly. In town, we have about 31 doors there the service center. Boy, that does pop, doesn't it? About 45, 50 employees, generally speaking, not including line drivers that go north. We're actually having a dinner this week, and some of our line drivers have actually been with the company and moving for about 40 years. So it's a well-established little old Alaskan company that operates worldwide. And the other one. I went too far. Okay, that there, we'll kind of go over some of the Linden companies. Linden is actually about 17 different companies. This is Alaska West. This is Gage Schutte's operation in South Fairbanks. During the course of the year, he does the heavy haul fluid transportation. You'll see him heading on up the Steese to Prudhoe Bay, also servicing the mines of interior Alaska, including Pogo. Thank you very much. Over the course of the year, he'll move about 15 million gallons of fluid out of the South Fairbanks operation. To do the math, that's about 625 rail cars that come on in South Fairbanks. They have an unloading facility there, a tank cleaning facility, and also they have facilities for a Linden training center that provides a lot of the training for oil industry, Alaska, and so forth. This is Linden Oilfield Services. A few years ago, we kind of recognized within the company that the North Slope was just a slightly different operation than operating in Fairbanks, Anchorage, or beyond. So developed Linden Oilfield Services. The picture isn't real clear, but the trailer just looks a little bit unique from what you would see around in Fairbanks. One of the additional features we offered this past year is to provide equipment and personnel to assist in downhole operation drilling up on the North Slope. They operate strictly on the North Slope. And I am not very good with this.
Sometimes that messes with you.
There we go. I'll get it. This is Bering Marine Alaska Hovercraft. Bering Marine actually services Linden companies itself. However, the Alaska Hovercraft Services actually is a operating system. They operate on the Kuskokwim River primarily, servicing about 8 communities along the Kuskokwim River. That hovercraft there, it can handle about 40,000 pounds. I forget exactly how many people can ride in the thing, but it'll service all the communities along the Kuskokwim. It also services the ENI Spy Island. And outside of Alaska, those of us that live in Alaska, we consider Linden, Transport, and Alaska West. However, a large component of the Linden family of companies is Milky Way. Milky Way, if you drink milk in the Pacific Northwest or in Alaska, chances are the milk has traveled in the Milky Way tankers. They move about 1 million pounds of milk a day. Oh, excuse me, let me back up on that. I had that wrong. That is 1 million pounds of milk an hour. So that goes from the farmers to the dairy. You happen to notice that stainless steel tank, that's another division of Linden. That is the Linden Tank Division. When was hauling milk, there were certain features that we just couldn't buy commercially, so Linden developed their own company to build their own stainless steel tanks. Those tanks go to the dairy, picks up the milk, takes it to the processors. That's probably not the neatest picture in the whole wide world, but that's Linden International. Those of us that deal in Fairbanks, we think of Linden International as the air freight division, of which they are. However, they'll move from small air freight packages to coordinating ocean shipments, international operations. You see some of their dots there. They are, let's see here, they primarily work on large-scale projects, a lot of humanitarian kind of stuff. They also have some divisions in Canada that work with the pharmaceutical industry, housing and distribution of pharmaceuticals. That's kind of the neat picture. That's Linden Air Cargo, won the C-30s this past year. Linden added 6 onto the fleet, so currently operating 13 of the C-130s worldwide. There'll always be a C-130 in Alaska supporting Alaskan operations and oil field or oil spill response in the Valdez area. The crews primarily come on out of Alaska. They'll work from Haiti. There was relief efforts in Haiti, peacekeeping in Congo, hurricanes, road washouts. Another feature that they started this past few years is fighting forest fires. They'll actually have a removable tank that goes on into the belly of the C-130 and they'll fight forest fires. They actually did quite a bit of work in Australia with them. That there is Alaska Marine Lines, twice weekly service into central Alaska. This barge here would go into Whittier. You'll notice on the bottom of it, the containers there are stacked 3 tall. That's a 400 by 100 foot barge. Those containers are actually placed on top there with forklifts. Underneath you can kind of make out some lines. Those are 9 tracks for rail cars coming to Alaska. So once that barge is loaded there, they move it on over to another dock, and through a series of ballasts, they can kind of keep the barge level as they put on the train cars to come on up to Alaska. Going on over to Flowline, you'll see the gondolas with the pipe on the that they've been working on to send on up to the moose pad. Those would have ridden on up on one of those barges. By coincidence, we refer to Alaska Marine Lines as AML. However, AML also stands for Aloha Marine Lines, and we service Hawaii with barge service as well. This is a division of Linden that will really be impacted with the Save Salmon initiative. This is Knick Construction. They do a lot of airport and field work throughout Alaska. A lot of remote kind of work, and a lot of it with DOT. One of the things we're really proud of, Linden is supportive of its employees. We all kind of a variety of different things that interest us. The company supports us. Peter Kaiser has won the Kuskokwim 300 4 times in a row, and recently came in 5th in the Iditarod, and we're proud of many of the employees of Linden. It's a great company. And I did not time this. I just got there we go. Back again, back. Right there, that's Nano Logistics on the ore hauled in the Red Dog mine. They haul the material back and forth to the dock. Over the course of the year, we'll take barges on in there. Typically, about 40,000 tons of material gets barged in support of the mine there at Red Dog. That's one of the haulers that goes back and forth. And that's the one that kind of started it all. That's truck number 27. It started service into Fairbanks in 1954 with a deal that was put together at the Mecca Bar. Brought swinging meat on into Fairbanks, delivered it to cars. We still run the highway twice a week on into Fairbanks from Seattle and also out of Edmonton. The truck and trailer will be here July 19th for our picnic out there on Pega Road. Everybody's invited. You can go ahead and climb on inside the van there. It's actually set on up as a rolling museum for construction of the Alcan Highway. And I think that is it. I have no idea how long I went for, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. I'd like to ask Katie Capozzi from Stand for Alaska to make a quick announcement.
Thank you, Tiffany. And I just wanted to thank Marissa and the entire staff here at the Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce for inviting us to make this presentation. Fairbanks Chamber has been super proactive on this issue from the beginning. You're the first Chamber of Commerce to take an official position, so we really appreciate your support, and I know that we'll be working together a lot as the summer goes on. So I think it's pretty clear that this ballot measure isn't going after one industry. It's not going after mining. It's not going after oil and gas. It's going after everybody in this room. The ballot measure is littered with unintended consequences that will impact every person, every Alaskan. So here's the deal. We don't exactly know which ballot it's going to show up on. It's either going to be on the primary or the general. We'll find that out in about a month, and that's when we'll have a ballot number, and we'll be able to start letting you know when it's time to show up and how to vote. In the meantime, we really need you to join our coalition, or at least you can text this number here to sign up to learn more. Go check us out on Facebook and follow us on Twitter, and you can just learn more about the initiative. And then if you, actually, is the clicker here? Yeah, it is. So we have a business coalition of over 200, okay. Over 200 businesses statewide so far. I'm sure there's, actually I know for sure there's businesses represented here that are already on the coalition. We would like to add your business to that as well. And we're trying to make it as easy for you as possible. So there are sign-up sheets on all the tables. There are options to go online to standforak.com to sign up there. We have these cool little stickers that look great on the back of phones. Please take those. And Anna mentioned they'll look good on a hard hat too. Water bottles, whatever, so please take that and join us. It's going to be really important to stand in solidarity. We are the Alaskans here that are being impacted by this. So stand for Alaska, join the coalition, and eventually vote no. We'll let you know more soon. Yes, Lisa, did you have a quick question? Oh, that's a very good question. So, Kara, do you want to take a crack at that? So the question is, who's funding Stand for Salmon?
So the proponents, it's a little bit of a web trying to figure that out, to be honest. There are several different organizations that have set up ballot measure groups that are pushing this initiative. Some have said it's to stop the Pebble Mine, to be quite honest. But if you look at some of the materials for other organizations, in their priorities, they advocate to keep Alaska's fossil fuels in the ground. They also talk about transitioning away from a fossil fuel-based Alaska economy. And so it's most of the funding to date have come from hedge fund investors on the East Coast. There's an organization out of Oregon. There's an organization in Florida that are conservationist type groups that have tried to pass similar measures in the West Coast, all in the name of protecting habitat, but they're really trying to stop development.
Thanks for the question, Lisa. And the last thing I just want to give a shout out to is Ken and Linden. All of the Linden companies are on the Stand for Alaska Coalition. You were one of the first groups to sign up, so thank you very much. And we hope to add more today. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Chamber pot drawing, we're almost done. We have several items today. If you're interested in donating an item, please contact the chamber. They will gladly accept that. The first item is donated by Santina's Flowers and Gifts. There's a bouquet of flowers over there. It's for ticket ending in 9285.
That's mine right here.
Awesome. And they're for me.
Did I win?
Flowers.
Okay.
I'm just.
You.
Next item is donated by Linden. Jacket. Ticket ending in 9241. Oh, awesome. Congratulations. All right, we have an item donated by Pogo, a hoodie and a Hydro Flask coffee mug. Ticket ending in 9335. Oh, congratulations. All right, another item donated by Pogo Mine, a commemorative coin. The value is about $250. Ticket ending in 9458. Oh, congratulations. All right, our 50-50 today, $126. Ticket ending in 9310. Oh, congratulations. Join us next week for an update from Lockheed Martin on the LRDR project and note. And just as a reminder, we're at Ravens Landing. Have a good week. Thank you for coming.